Summit. I am so pleased and delighted to be able to connect you with 24 expert guest speakers. The goal of the summit has been to provide practical tools and tips how to tap into your own creativity, connect and collaborate, to take a dream and turn it into reality. And one of the guest speakers today has done that several times, and her name is Kathy Barbini. She's the founder of Big Voice Pictures, producer director. She's an award-winning independent documentary and television producer. She's worked for the Discovery Channel, and she is an amazing woman, and I can't wait for you to hear more about her. So I'm not going to talk, and I'm going to let Kathy talk. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Ray. Thank you for that. Oh, that was beautiful.
Oh, well, I'm so thrilled to have you in this conversation today, and I would love to know what inspires you. Who inspires you?
Well, I would say the people that inspire me are passionate, compassionate, honest, generous, people who believe in justice and who stand strong for a cause, people unafraid to face the depths of who they are and go through whatever they need to go through to find the truth of who they are, and people that can actually bring that into the world through relationships, through their work, through creativity. It doesn't matter to me what a person has been through, where they're from. If they can stand strong for who they are and do that with integrity and honesty and compassion and generosity, I'm inspired by that kind of person. And in terms of what I'm inspired by, not in terms of people, but in things that I enjoy. I'm inspired by nature. I'm inspired by art. I love documentary. I love writing. I love books. I love faith. Anything that a spiritual journey is something that inspires me. So I'm filled with curiosity, and I just enjoy life. What can I say?
I love that. Okay, so let's talk about your journey to becoming a documentary and television producer. I'd love people to understand, how you got from where you began to where you are today, and then talk about some of the movies that you have made and the power of that. So,
sure. Well, I went to school for journalism and film and writing in San Francisco State. And then from there on, I went, I'm from Long Island and love New York City. I grew up going to Broadway and spending a lot of time in New York. My father had a business in advertising. He also was an artist, so we used to sell paintings in Greenwich Village. So New York was my backyard, and I loved it and enjoyed it. So I ended up going to the city, New York City, for my career, and started out in the television networks there, working for ABC and NBC as a PA researcher, worked my way up to associate producer, ended up going to Washington, D.C. for working for the Discovery Channel for several years, and then moved back to California because I also was drawn to California, loved California. And when I got there, there were no television networks. There was a lot of independent documentary filmmakers working in San Francisco, some of the best. So I really learned the process of what it meant to make an independent documentary, and that required learning how to write grants, raise money, and it was very different than having a secure job to go to at the television networks. There was not a lot of networking. It seemed like most people were islands of creative artists and filmmakers working on their own and really making films from an idea to the fundraising to production, and then learning how to get it out there in the world as self-distribution. So I learned all that through a mentor that I had met, who did her first film on childhood sexual abuse called Breaking Silence. Her name is Teresa Tellini, and she mentored me through the process of making a documentary and how to raise money and do all of that's required to make your own film. And under her mentorship, I she inspired me to make my own documentary, and suggested, I was looking for ideas at the time, and she had done this film on childhood sexual abuse, and she said what she felt was really needed was a film about women healing from the abuse and becoming empowered. And she really did very well with her first film. And so I worked, with her in terms of learning how to continue to do that work. And over 4 or 5 years, I raised my own money. I worked under her nonprofit umbrella organization, and slowly but surely, I raised money. Every time I raised some money, I got some grants from, my first grant actually was from the International Documentary Association's, I think it was that organization. Anyway, it was called the Pioneer Fund. It was for first-time documentary filmmakers, and that was my first grant. So I raised that money and filmed a little clip and put together a clip, and from that point on, I went out and raised more money through grants and fundraising events. So we did everything and anything to get the funds to film. And slowly but surely, over a period of 4 years it took, I made my first documentary, The Healing Years, and which sort of made a splash because it was about hope and healing and speaking, and women speaking out. And so many women started coming out of the closet, revealing that they had been sexually abused. And I think because it was a message of hope, it really did very well. It was just a small film, but it just, my husband Simon is a marketer and distributor, and he helped get the film out there. And because of both of our efforts, it really spread like wildfire, and it was, used as a tool throughout the world, basically.
Well, and I love that. I think that is one of the messages of this program, is that I believe through sharing our creative voices and visions, we can raise awareness of important social issues, move people from apathy to action, drive change, and be a light where there's a lot of darkness. And so what you're saying is exactly how it evolved for you. I'm just curious, so what are some of the tools that people were using in your movie? What were some of the stories that you shared that created hope for people?
In The Healing Years?
Yeah.
The tools. Well, I think one of the things that I remember, we produced it about 10 years ago. One thing that women found most helpful was being in a support group with other women. We filmed at Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco. They had started a healing circle for women, and that was a very empowering group for a lot of these women. Some of them were even homeless and, had been addicts. And because of the power of sisterhood and women talking about their secrets of being abused in many ways, they were able to give each other strength. And it was so inspiring to witness that and have them taking back their power through a process of group circle of women. And I just have to say, I think that's essential for anybody that's in a healing process, is to join in community. And not even in a healing process, but in any kind of the work we're doing as creative activists, we have to join in community with each other. We need each other. So that was one thing in the film. I'm going back to that time.
Well, you could talk about your other films too. It's okay.
Sure.
I think it's really important that people hear that, and we've heard this over and over during our conversations, how important it is to create a circle of trust where you can actually be authentic, tell your story, and whatever that story, even if it's in a setting in prison or, in a church or wherever it is, we need community. And it's about, connecting rather than being isolated and alone. And so I love that you brought that out. That was great. And I think we need it for healing as well as for social change. Just like you were saying, if we're going to change, we have to find how we can connect with people. So, and I know Simon's always saying it's through love. So, and for those who don't know this, I interviewed Simon for my book, The Creative Activist, and his whole message was about love. And I think it's really a key piece of the information that we need to do to go forward, to create a society, a world that is based on love, forgiveness, compassion, connection, and creativity. So that's my little soapbox today. So
it's true. It's very true. And Simon and I had learned through our other film about male survivors healing from child sexual abuse that what we did with that film was a little bit more than we did with the Healing Years, in that we coordinated and collaborated with organizations throughout the world. Basically, we became partners in distribution and outreach, so that we knew the film was going to get into communities throughout the world. And we did a lot of speaking and we did workshops, healing workshops. We actually we created a workshop for men that was called The Hero's Journey, in talking about the healing process as being a hero's journey. Really, it's not something to be afraid of or to be ashamed of. It's a process of going through all the stages of what a hero does in a journey, and that's going into the darkness and coming, getting helpers along the way, and going deeper into yourself to grab the strength, and then coming around to the home stretch. And it was amazing how men just came out of like this long secret of hiding from the fact that they had been sexually abused as boys, and, coming into a community with the support of collaborative efforts from the support systems and organizations we worked with, like their, counseling organizations and male survivor support groups and so on and so forth. And they were able to feel held by the community and come out of shame. And what we found, what Simon did a lot of speaking, even in the military and that sort of thing, about the hero's journey. And what we found is that the bottom line, people want to be heard and they want to be loved, and they want to embrace those hurt sides, those painful sides of themselves. And when we do that through making safe places for people to come out and talk about their lives and so on. So yes, love and all of the support systems that we can gather in healing and in our work. I think as creative activists, like I was saying earlier, we can't do it alone. I know my own journey and my own challenges with being a creative activist is those times that you do need to be alone, because the vision, as visionaries, the vision comes, we're connected to whatever it is that we feel where our creativity is coming from. But there's days and months that it can be very lonely, because it's here I am sitting with this idea and this vision. Now what do I do with it? And so there's a time that for me it's an internal struggle of connecting with that voice, that vision, all alone. And it can be lonely. You can start feeling like, am I nuts doing this again? I've often said I'm never going to make another film again. This is, why am I doing this again? But by the time, the time spending sitting within the loneliness, with this vision, we have a lot of faith, Simon and I. So faith is a big factor in it. We believe in God. We have a higher power. It's our source of strength. And the more we can, embrace that and walk through the process that, we're not really alone, then the community
it just feels that way
up.
at moments, and I think it's so much about that critical voice inside, are you crazy? What were you thinking? Are you a fraud? All those kind of voices
Yes.
that pop up.
Yes.
It's like, what do I know about this topic? I know when I sat down to write, my book, The Creative Activist, it came out as a whisper, and it started with, you should interview 100 leaders. I said, what? Why?
Wow.
Me? Are you crazy? And it was like, I do believe in sitting and waiting for some of those answers, and it is extremely excruciating at times, because it's like I'm a doer, and I want to jump into action, and I want to make things happen. And so allowing that space to just let it evolve. And I'm thinking that I'm laughing because I'm like trying to make this summit happen, and why aren't people registering and all these things? It's like I just gave my own answer. Allow it to happen, and it will. And it's a trust and faith issue. So it's like, okay, but I think we all go through that, especially as creatives. And I don't know about you, but my mind is going 24/7 often, and I'll have 5 creative ideas all at the same time. And then it's what do you do when you get an idea? Do you write it down? Do you have a notebook? Do you have a file folder? What do you do? How do you start your process of picking and choosing which project you're going to work on?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because as creatives, I think sometimes we're barraged with ideas, and I certainly am. Oh my gosh, it can be overwhelming. I have actually created a spiritual practice for that, where I sort of envision taking all of the ideas captive, like, outside of for me not to, it's sort of God, higher power, whatever people's words are for it. Take these ideas from me, please. This is too much. When it starts feeling too much. And that really has been a great practice in terms of the protecting myself from being overwhelmed by the ideas and the visions, and it works for me. And then what I allow is for slowing down through a spiritual practice, or even taking breaks. I take a lot of breaks. I take walks. I go for a swim. We live by the ocean. I'll just jump in the ocean. I'll go for a run on the beach. I'll walk down to the cafe. I'll cook, whatever it is, to get my mind off of any ideas, and let it sort of happen organically. So, I kind of have an observer part of me that observes the ideas that are coming. Once the big one, once the onslaught of the ideas are taken captive, then it seems like the other ideas come slower. The ones that are supposed to rise to the surface come slower, and they show their face. And then I do a lot of journaling. I write about them, and if they keep coming back and don't go away, then we pray. Or my Simon is a complete intuitive visionary, and he gets a sense. I rely on his ideas and his thoughts on ideas a lot, because he gets a sense, and he's also a marketer, so he knows what people want out there, and he'll give me some good feedback, like, no, I don't think that, it's not really, I don't think it's going to work, or, oh my gosh, that idea, we have to do it, which is what he did with Boys and Men Healing. I didn't want to do another film on child sexual abuse, and he was adamant that film was going to make a huge difference, and it did. So aside from my own journaling, my own spiritual practices, I Simon, prayer, talking about it, that's how we process it. And it takes time.
Right.
It doesn't happen overnight,
Well, I think something that came up for me, and I stay in my own spiritual practice. I work with a coach for the last 2 years. Well, I've worked with several coaches, but I consistently with this coach for 2 years, and I signed up for another year because this came up to me. It felt like my vision was too big. What, it's like, are you kidding me? And it's like, and it was like, and then I have to say, okay, I've been given a vision because I already have the ability to do it, if that is what I'm meant to do. But it was a really challenging idea to shift into. And I know people have said to me, well, how do I know if it's not my ego versus, a true vision, and it's like, wow, that was, because I've taught, different classes on how to create a vision, a powerful vision, and what would you love to do in 3 years, and who would you love to be, and, and so there are things for me. It's like, I want to be a speaker at the UN, UNICEF, and talk about the power of the arts for healing and social change. I feel like that there is some piece of that is mine to share. And so I know for myself, I went to New York a year ago, and I went and stood in front of the UN, and I took a picture, and I went in front of UNICEF and took a picture and put it on a vision board. But it was like, I was like, who am I? And it's like, so it's interesting, because I think part of this is learning to grow into who you are meant to be. I think that's part
I
of
love that.
Thank you. I think that's part of this whole journey as creative activists, that we are to grow into who we're meant to be, because we have these gifts, and sometimes they just feel so powerful outside of us, and they're really not. It's an inside job.
That's beautifully said. Oh yes, that you said that so well. It's so true. It is growing into ourselves. And I just had a conversation with two very lovely women friends of mine yesterday, and we were talking about women when we get scattered, and the scattering and the depression or anxieties that a lot of women have, and I have been one of them. It's usually when we're not delving into our purpose, when we're not taking control of what we're called to do, and when we're not stepping into our true selves or going on that journey to become our true selves. Scattering happens. I even had a dream long time ago, before I started this filmmaking journey, where women alcoholics, I had a dream that women alcoholics were not tapping into their true selves. They weren't tapping into a creative voice. And I think that when we don't is when we get splintered as women, as people even. And that, it is a courageous journey to go within, to, unfold ourselves, and we have to do it.
So what are some of the tips you would say for people to go into that process, to find their own voice, to find their purpose or calling? Do you have some tips and tools for people?
It's not an easy process, because even just recently, I after Boys and Men Healing, we spent a couple of years making the film, fundraising, all of that, and then we spent 3 or 4 years in intense outreach, going out into communities, spreading it around the world and that sort of thing. But there was a point, things were starting to trickle down, slow down a little bit, and I needed it. I actually had been hired after that to produce a documentary for somebody. But after that, I got very burned out and really needed a break from it all. And I took a bit of a sabbatical. I started writing I started a spiritual blog, and that helped me. The writing and getting in touch with my spiritual self helped me get in touch with a different side to me. But I still didn't feel like I was reaching a new calling, a new phase of what I feel like I needed to do out in the world. And it was painful, because nothing was coming forth. So what I have learned through that painful process was just letting go, and letting nothing happen be okay. I was working on spending time with my son, who is in high school, and he was getting ready to graduate, and I knew that I was going through an empty nest phase coming up, and that it was important to spend more time with him. So I started looking at, what is my priority if my calling isn't really coming clear at this moment, a new calling. So just being able to be in touch with our organic selves, making it okay sometimes to wait, in that waiting place. It's sort of that cocoon, that butterfly cocoon image that I have, that something is going on in the dark place of the cocoon, when we think nothing is happening, but there's a lot going on, really. And then when the butterfly's ready to emerge, it will.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but more of
it does make
organic
sense, and I think that's part of the creative process, is allowing that time and space. Whether you call it the void, if you call it that in between space, that's one of the conversations that started to emerge as I'm talking to more and more creative activists during this this period. How do we do that? How do we handle those transitions? Because you're dealing with a life transition, the empty nester. I'm at the other end. I don't want to call it crone because I don't like that name, but I am 66, and I get to be grandma now, so I love that. And that is rebirth, on some level. Today I played with my three grandchildren who are 4.5, 2.5, and 1.5, basically. And I was running all over, and it was like, it was just joyful, and it got me into a different space. And I think we go through, especially as women, we are prone to, and we have bodily changes that mark these changes as well. And so, owning that and honoring that, and I think, as you said, sometimes our purpose evolves. It's what we were started to call. It may not be what we're called to do later on, and I think that's also honoring that authenticity. And we don't do that enough because it's like, well, I went and studied this, or I got a degree in this, or I did this, and I'm going to make that work, even though that's not what we're called to do as we go on this journey called life.
Exactly. Oh, that's so true. We have to give ourselves permission to go through these phases as women, and honor those, and not. I think that we're in America, we feel like, oh, we have to do, and we have to achieve something. And I love what you're saying, and spending time enjoying your grandchildren and finding those moments of joy, and enjoying that without doing. That's a beautiful place to be. Being content.
And it was a gift to me because they came in from California, and it's like, I can just breathe in them rather than, working 24/7. And, and that's one of the things, too, as creative activists, I wanted people to connect, because how many of us work from home, and we have our home office, and we wake up at 3 and, okay, let's work for a few hours, and we don't set the boundaries and put on our calendars time for joy and fun. And I think that's important, that we renew, rejuvenate, whether it's going to the ocean like you guys do, or the Joshua Tree, or whatever. We have to find what works for us. So
it's so important, isn't it?
It is.
Sure.
I want to go back a little bit to filmmaking and talk about how can somebody. What would you suggest to them today? It is a little bit of a different time and place than when you started. And if somebody is interested and they have this idea to create a film, what would you say to them?
Well, they're in a good position, much better than I think we were back then, because today the video cameras that are available are affordable. The cinematography that you see in some documentaries is a camera that the average person could afford. So you have the access to high quality, decent cameras, and then desktop editing. I would say learn Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere. We years ago, all we did was hire cinematographers, hire editors, and at a great expense. And now, I'm looking at myself and saying, gosh, should I do it this way, or should I learn the new way to do it where I'm not raising all that money? So I would say learn everything. Get a camera, learn to be a cinematographer, learn how to edit on Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere or whatever you feel comfortable with in some of the editing programs. Learn it all and just start getting out there and shooting. I have a niece who's in her 20s. She does that. And so she's shooting, she's editing. It's a lot of work. Yes, it is, but you're not spending all the years, or all the time and effort raising money. I'm even going through that right now. Do I hire the camera crew for $1,200, the cinematographer for $1,200 a day? That is what a high level, award-winning, Sundance award-winning cinematographer would charge with equipment, and sometimes even more. Or do I get a camera and do it myself and learn? That's the dilemma that I'm having, and having to learn all over again. But the younger people, or anybody, has access to all of this at their fingertips. So it's kind of exciting in a lot of ways.
Oh, that is. It is. I was trying to hire a videographer for the summer, and I called the local arts college and got an intern, and then he got another job, and it worked out fine because I didn't really have the energy to and the bandwidth to do the work I was intending to do. But that was another way because I wanted somebody who already had the expertise, who had studied, and I did not want to learn that. But
Sure, and there's that place. I feel like that. I really do like working with the team, and I do
yeah.
like having a cinematographer and all that. So for people like us, I think that it is. I would say before going into making a film or a documentary, it's a lot of work and it's a huge undertaking, and I don't want to gloss it over or rose color it, because it's not an easy process. It's a long process. It's an expensive process. It takes everything out of you. It becomes your life, and so being prepared for that and being prepared to find ways to not be too diligent and give yourself breaks and that sort of thing, or
right.
if you can't afford a high level professional cinematographer, there's tons of amazing young filmmakers that are willing to work for a lot less. So that's the other
Right. I mean,
option
look into
in
the interns in
between.
your local colleges. I mean, I got a number of people who were interested in doing the job, for a summer kind of thing. And at some point, I still will go out. I want to do man on the street interviews, and I want to put together a small reel about, if you could change the world, what would you do? If you knew you could not fail, what would you do? If you had a magic wand, how would you make the world better? So I'm really interested in everyday people answering that question, and
Mhm.
so that's my dream little project for the next
Yeah,
piece.
and
So.
that's doable. That's very doable. I mean, and then there's media organizations in a lot of cities. Where do you live, Ray?
Chicago. So there's plenty of opportunities in this.
Plenty. So right, there's media centers where you could rent your own camera.
Right.
And that's a great option if you didn't, want to hire a young person and get the camera out there yourself. So that's a very doable goal that you have, and in terms of if you have to
Well,
edit
and now that I've
anything.
learned how to do live stream, Facebook live stream, I can just go out and interview people on the street and have it recorded on live stream. So I sort of like that too, So
Yep.
I was like, okay, that was one thing I just mastered this last week. So I feel like, okay, I can do this,
I
sort of
love that.
figuring it out.
And
I was like,
I'm just impressed with how much you have been doing. That's the other thing, is to really look at look at how far you've come since your dream and your vision, and having these little goals just keeps adding to it.
right, right. So what is your dream for yourself? What is a vision that you hold dear to your heart, where you would like to be in 3-5 years?
Well, let me see. That's a great question. I'm developing a new documentary that sort of came over this waiting period of 2 or 3 years, that has kind of come back and not gone away. And I have an interest in Christianity, and just the patriarchy has bothered me for a long time. The hate that has evolved from the anti-gay patriarchy within the evangelical churches. And I've learned a lot of information about the spreading of these kinds of churches that are also anti-woman, that women shouldn't be leaders in our church or society. There's a huge push for churches like that by these church planters that believe that men should be leaders only, that kind of thing. It's not just the Catholic Church that won't ordain women, for instance, but it trickles into all aspects of society, into our politics, because you have the religious right, very involved in politics. So equal rights against women has a force of these people who believe in these theologies that should go into our culture. Anyway, I'm developing a documentary about that right now. So my dream is for that to be produced, funded first, produced, and be another powerful tool to raise awareness about women's rights and patriarchy and religion and that sort of thing. So that's been a passion of mine that's been unfolding. Very excited about it, and I'd like to see that. I'd like to see myself in 3 years when it's finished, or even before then, traveling all over the world and speaking about it and having screenings and creating another outreach voice for women on women's issues.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. How can people get a hold of you? Find out
Go
more?
to our website, www.bigvoicepictures.com, or our new film is baptizingfeminism.com, and we have a contact form, and all our social networks are on there, so you can find us there.
Oh, that's fabulous. And thank you so much for participating, Kathy. I think this conversation is going to help so many people, whether at the beginning of their journey with film and photography and video, or they're seasoned, because you opened up in such a vulnerable way and talking about all the spaces and places and your process. And I think people need to hear that so that they can be inspired and motivated. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I want to thank all our listeners. I hope you're writing notes. Every day I keep encouraging you to think about 3 things that you can use in your own life, and then make a commitment to do at least one action step toward your personal dream. And it doesn't matter if your dreams, gender equality, a sustainable planet, peace, cultural competency. This is the place to discover your voice and learn to increase your impact and influence. And I know you will, because everyone can make a difference. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Oh, thank you, Ray. Thanks, and best with this wonderful project.
Thank you. Bye.